just thrilled that you're here watching with us, whether or not you're watching live or you're watching the replay. I'm thrilled that you have taken time away to get with us and watch this show. And today we're going to be talking about a very important topic. And that topic is what matters the most to you. A lot of people don't know what matters the most to them, and as a result, they don't get the results that they want in their life. So today we're going to be diving deep into what matters the most to you. We're going to uncover some truths about core values. And what's also exciting is that I have two amazingly, incredibly awesome men that are going to be with us today, and I'm really excited about bringing them both on. Tim Brownson will be with us. He's an expert on core values. Don't want to miss that. We're going to be interviewing him live on Skype. And we also have live here as a guest, I have Bill Nixon. And Bill is also somebody that I thought, when I knew that I was going to do this episode on what matters the most to you, that he'd be the perfect person because knowing him, he has the element of living with values, and also he has a great story that you don't want to miss. But before I get into that, I want to share with you some insights and some secrets about what core values are, why people don't figure out what their core values are, and getting into a little bit more detail as to how you can figure out what your values are, because I'm sure you want to find out what matters the most to you, don't you? So first of all, what are core values? So there's a chat. If you're online, you can even just enter something in the chat if you'd like. Core values are so important that they affect every facet of your life. They affect your behaviors, your environments, the choices that you make, the people you end up dating or marrying, the decisions that you make as a result of where you're going to go for an occupation or a job. They affect every facet of your life. And when you don't know what your core values are, you don't get the results that you want to get in your life. I like to define core values as the truest essence of who you are at the core. So whatever is deep inside is actually what's going to manifest itself in your life. There's a few things that are really important to know about core values, and the first thing to know is that a lot of people don't figure out what they are. And I want to go over a few of the reasons why people don't ever figure out what core values are. The first reason is, it's pretty obvious, people don't know what values are. They hear about values, or they see values up on some billboard somewhere in some building, and they say, okay, well, this big organization has these values, and that looks nice and fancy and pretty, but that belongs in organizations. They don't apply that to something that will be important for them. But I ask you, if a big organization needs to find out and get clear with what their values are, why isn't it important for you, for your life, to figure out what your values are and what's most important to you? So the first reason is that people really don't know what values are. It's kind of a vague concept for them. They would generally get the idea that these are things that I value, or these are things that help me in life, but they've never been taught what values are. They've never been taught the importance of values. And as I mentioned earlier, the results that they end up getting in their life aren't necessarily the results that they want to get. And part of that is because they don't know what their values are and they're not living with them with authenticity. The second reason why people don't figure out what their core values are is because of complacency. This is a bit of an epidemic. A lot of people may address something that's important to them for a small period of time, but then after that period of time evaporates, they move on, and then they don't go back to it. So for an example, if a stressful situation happens in their life and they come to an aha moment and they're like, I got to change something, I got to figure out what is causing me to get into this cycle, and then things get a little bit better, they don't ever address that or go back to that. So they're complacent. And complacency happens in a lot of different ways. Complacency also happens just with you being involved or busy or just too involved with life, just going through the routines. And a lot of people might identify with this statement. You're living life by default. If you have children, you're chasing after your kids. Or perhaps you're involved with different things. You're volunteering here, you're at your job, you come back home, the stresses of the house, figuring out how you're going to pay the mortgage and all the bills, all of these different things, and all of a sudden, choices get handed to you, but you really aren't making choices. You're just existing. You're living by default. A lot of people never get close to what matters the most to them because they're complacent. One quote that I often bring up is a quote by Socrates, and he said that an unexamined life is not worth living. So if that's true, then there's a large percentage of people out there that are really living lives that aren't worth living. And they're not getting closer to what matters the most to them because they're really not examining their lives as to why they are doing things that they're doing and what matters the most to them and what values they have at the core. The third reason why people don't figure out what their core values are is fear. Now, let's be delicate on this. Fear comes with a lot of different elements, and I get that some people would have fear to figure out what their values are because that might mean that they have to change some things in their life. If you actually figure out what drives you and what matters the most to you, you might actually have to make different decisions and choices to align with those values, wouldn't you? So I would suggest that overcoming that fear would be one of the most beneficial things for you in deciding that you want to figure out what your values are. The fourth reason why people don't figure out what their values are is doubt. And let's just be honest. There's a lot of things out there that can cause you to doubt. I'm a life coach. I work in the personal development field, and I believe that people can overcome and rise above, and I believe in possibility thinking and positive thinking and all these things that some people have had experiences with, but they thought, oh, well, it's not really going to help me, or how could figuring out what my values really make a difference? And they just doubt that that would actually change something. And part of that is because they have scarcity mindset. And next week, we're going to be talking more about the scarcity mindset and how to live in an abundance mindset. But I'll suffice it to narrow down and say that if you have scarcity in your life, which is basically a limiting belief, you will not be able to live in the truest existence of who you are. And you won't be able to see the possibilities that are all around you. And you probably won't be able to get over the hurdle of doubt that's preventing you from figuring out what your values are. And the final reason, which I think is an absolutely huge reason for a lot of people, is environmental factors. Outside forces and environmental factors. So outside forces and environmental factors could mean your sphere of influence is preventing you from figuring out what your values are. It could be your parents that have directed you in a certain way that have possibly prevented you from figuring out what your values are. Let's face it, a lot of cultures out there have conditioned their children to believe that they need to go down a certain path, and if they follow this path, then that will lead them to the path of whatever is right or righteous or whatever it is. A lot of people have had influences in their life, not just parents, but also peer influences, where they've been influenced by their values and their set of ideals and what they possibly would want to have lived out in their life, but they didn't have a chance to. And the problem with that is that you may find, if you do that you're walking up somebody else's ladder. You may think that you're doing all the right things, but you're walking up somebody else's ladder, and once you get to the top, you realize this destination is not where I want to go. This destination isn't my dream destination, and you feel very dissatisfied. So I'm going to go right back to the very first point that I made, is that the results that you get are often not what you want, and that's because you haven't figured out what your values are first. I look at core values as a foundation. If you don't have a foundation, you don't know how to actually move forward. So those are a lot of the reasons, the top 5 reasons why people don't figure out what their core values are. And now I want to get into how you can understand and build into living with values. And I'm only going to get into this in brief because I have some guests on the show that I really want to discuss this deeper with. But know this, is I actually work with clients and I help them figure out what their core values are. And I think that it's an incredibly valuable process. When I go through this process with people and they figure out what their values are and they start to be able to use them, things change in their life. They actually have totally new identity if you will, because they actually have something to go on. There's affirmations that when they figure out what their core values are, they affirm things in their life as well. So what I want to show you here real quick is something that I think is really interesting. You can see it on the camera beside us. And I'll give you a little sneak peek of a game that I'm building. And I'll give a little shout out to Creative Emotion because they're helping me on the coding side of things. And this game is called the Abundance Coaching Values Game. What it really does, it helps you take 360 values and narrow them down to the top values that matter the most to you in life. So I'm just going to show you a quick demo, and this isn't going to be long. I'm just going to give you a little teaser here. But what you can do is, if you look on the abundancecoaching.ca/TV page, if that's where you are right now, so you can go to the subscription form and you can put your name and email address. You'll get our updates. But you also get an update as to when this game will be finished, and what I'll do is I'll let you play it for free when it's done as well. So you can figure out what your values are. So essentially, it brings you on an adventure, and I'll just give you a teaser on the adventure. You start off by going on a cruise ship with 360 values. And what matters the most to you will be figured out through this process. So I have you score yourself based upon 360 values. And the values could be anything, like usefulness. The values could be values like watchfulness or zeal or vision. And you can score yourself just as what you feel resonates with you or what's important. And this is just one step of many that you go through as you go on an adventure to figure out what your core values are. I really think that it's important to actually lock in to both sides of your brain in order to actually go through a process like this. And I'm not going to sugarcoat, this process takes you 45 minutes. But I think that it's absolutely valuable that you do the process and you take the time to do it. Because when you do that, you've been given credit to something that is so incredibly important. It's probably the most important assessment that you will ever do in your life. So what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to go through this process and figure out what your core values are in a number of steps and a number of phases. And at the very end, you'll get a list of values that matter the most to you. I call them your essential core values in life. And as you figure out what your core values are in life, you'll be able to use them as filters so that you make wise decisions. You'll be able to take that information and then break it down. I come up with 4 different pillars that you can actually make in 4 different types of categories for your decisions. And those categories are God and spirituality, and relationships and love, and work and finances, and health and well-being. And when you decide which category it is, you can use the values that are in that category and start using them as filters. Because what you want is you want to start to make the best decisions possible. And essentially a filter is like a sieve. And what does a sieve do? A sieve takes everything and then it filters out all of the waste so that you have an efficient process of keeping everything good. And when you need to make the choices and decisions in your life, you can use your core values to help you do that. Now, it's way more in depth than that. There's so many more other uses for core values, but that's one of the major ones for you to be able to do that in life. So once again, you can go to the TV page, you can sign up, get the updates, and we'll let you get the core values game when it's done. It'll be released very soon, and you can have that. So I hope that that was beneficial for you to help you figure out what core values are, why people don't figure out what values are, and then figure out how to find out what your values are. So there's a great tool to help you do that. So what I'm going to do right now is introduce a gentleman by the name of Tim Brownson. And Tim, I'm so excited, is going to be on our show because he has a great knowledge on what core values are. Tim has written a book on core values, and you can actually download it on his website, which is daringadventure.com. Tim is a coach. He's also an author and speaker, and his company is A Daring Adventure. And his central mission is to help people who feel stuck in life by utilizing values-based coaching. So I was super excited about bringing him on the show, and I'm just going to patch him in right now, and we're going to call him up, and just hold on with us because I'm just about to get him there. Hello, Tim.
Scott, how you doing?
I am doing great. I'm actually doing fantastic, mate. So I'm so pleased that you're here. I think that it's awesome that you're actually here, man. And you told me that you'd be just watching me now, but we have a live audience that's watching us as well. So feel free to give a shout out to the live audience or people that are watching the replay as well.
Of course. I'm just happy to be here, and hello to everybody. Happy Thanksgiving from a Brit. We don't have Thanksgiving, which I think we should. I think it's a great holiday, but happy Thanksgiving to everybody.
Awesome. Very cool. Very cool. Sweet. So, Tim, I'm going to interview you just on a few things. I just shared a few of the reasons why people don't figure out what their core values are. And we talked about this a little bit earlier when we were just having a casual chat. But I would love to hear reasons from you as to what you actually feel people have as blocks to find out what their core values are. Why don't people live with values?
Well, I think the first thing is that they don't know about values. They don't understand the power of them. So we live in a very sort of golden society, and that's sort of, I was going to say beat into kids. That's probably not a poor choice of language going through school, but very rarely are they exposed to values. So I think it's a question of not knowing what you don't know. I tend to find that most clients that I work with, when I explain them and explain the importance of them, the resistance tends to melt away, or it's getting the understanding of the importance to them. So to me, it's the majority of the time, it's just a sheer lack of knowledge of what a value is.
For sure, definitely. So tell me a little bit about just some of your work with values and why you've actually centered your whole coaching practice around that. Your statement, your fascination statement, is essentially centered around core values, and that's how you center your coaching. And why have you chosen core values as a center for what you do?
Because you cannot drill any further down into a person's identity than the values. Hypothetically speaking, Scott, I could take your home away from you, your family away from you, your job away from you, etc., but you would still be left. I can never take your values away from you. They're part of your makeup. So if I don't understand the client's core values, then I don't understand the client. And if I don't understand the client, how can I help them? Because otherwise, all I'm doing is bringing them into my map of the world within my value set and asking them to use that. And it doesn't work like that. There's cultural values, there's social values, there's personal values, and fundamentally they make up a person. So it allows me to be a better coach. It allows the client to understand their actions better and what's driving those actions at a deeper level. And it can create just a ridiculous amount of aha moments. The times when a client, say, booked 4 sessions with me and we've done the values in the second session, and it's like, oh, we're done now. I understand why I'm not doing this, and which is great in one way, but PayPal and the money back's not so great, because they've got everything out of 2 sessions. So they're that powerful, And this was a slow sort of process with me to understand that. I first got into coaching 8 years ago. Yeah, values are great, I'll do them with. But as time's moved on, I dealt with more and more clients. It just keeps coming back to, I can't do my job properly without this. And I don't understand how other coaches can coach without getting into the thorny topic of values.
Yeah, totally. And you know what? I found it interesting too, because we knew that the topic was going to be core values, and that's one of the core things that I also approach with coaching, because I totally agree with what you're saying. But me and my production assistant had to scour the net to find you. And there's not many people who center themselves or are experts on core values, but it's so important. Why is that?
That's a tough question, Scott. I think that's a lot to do with the fact that the coaching industry has exploded in the last sort of really 2 or 3 years. I mean, when I first became a coach, when we first moved to Orlando in February of 2006, I'd really got no competition in Orlando. I think there was 3 other coaches if you looked on Google. Now there's about 300. So I think what it is there's a lot of training organisations out there that are looking to get people trained quickly, so they can get the money in quickly and get them out and working with clients. Values take time to get an understanding of it and to fully understand how you can utilise it. It takes time, not just in teaching it, but in using the information. When you first start doing this with clients, it can be very touchy-feely. It can be very sort of, it's a visceral thing. So a lot of what I do, I can explain with science. So if I talk to you about reframing or anchoring or different techniques and that, I can explain to you at a neurological level what's going on and why this stuff works. I can't do that with values. They're much more nebulous. So I think that's why a lot of coaches fight shy of them, because they just don't really understand them, and they don't want to put the time into to doing that.
No, that's so real. That's so real. And as far as your process, you have a process. I was just sharing a little bit about the game that I actually have for people to actually play and figure out what their core values are. But I had a process, and I still use a process where I help them. You use the word nebulous, and you're right. How do you get over people when they're trying to score themselves from scoring themselves or coming up with a list that is a I want list? Because I find, and you probably have found too, is that the tendency is to choose the values that they think would be really nice to have, or the ideal values, or the things that they think that they want or that they should have. But how do you overcome that when you're figuring out what people's values are?
Well, I don't discriminate between a value that somebody wants and a value that somebody's got. So if you came to me and you said, I want the value of, let's say, freedom, I'd say, well, you've got it. What you mean is you want to live in alignment with that. So just because you're not in alignment doesn't mean to say it's not a value of yours. And that's where the issues crop up, where people have values, but they're not attuned to them. So I think that's absolutely critical. In terms of getting clients, I mean, I send them a list of sample values out, but I do that on the back of explaining that this is a very, I want them to move through the list very quickly. I want them to go with a gut feeling. Now, we could get into explaining now how gut feelings work and why they're so powerful and why people shouldn't overrule them, because they're more likely to be right than wrong. But let's just say we know gut feelings work. So I want people to move through the process, glance at it, what feels right. Values are all about feeling. You can't, I could give you my list of values, okay, and you could completely trash it. You could say, well, that doesn't make sense, because how can you have that without this, or whatever? But it makes sense to me, and I could do the same to yours. And I say this to clients: this isn't about what should be; it's about what is.
Yeah.
You do often get, certainly, probably the thorniest one is family. People will often think that family should be number one. That's when it can become an issue. It's just like, yeah, your family's important, but to you, love maybe more important, and that may feed into it. So it's kind of a complicated process, but it's also, to a certain extent, Scott, trusting the client to make their own decisions. Mm-hmm. And then when we go through the process, that's when I can refine it and say, well, what does that mean to you? If they give me a value that I'm dubious about, so if somebody comes to me with a value of money, I know money's not value. It can never be a value, because it's like, well, what does money give you?
Yes.
Well, it gives me freedom or whatever. Okay, so that's the value. So then we get into values. So that then you can use the values to achieve what somebody wants without needing necessarily the money, for example.
Yeah.
I mean, we all know, you've worked with people that earn a lot of money that are unhappy. People that earn very little money, like me, that are happy. I earned a lot more money in sales than I do in coaching. I couldn't give a damn.
That's true, man. That's awesome. And you mentioned family. You're right. That's one of the thorniest ones, isn't it? I find in coaching is that often comes up as a top value. But then when you start questioning someone on how their actions aren't in alignment with them choosing family, because it's very easy for them to choose camaraderie or just, going out with the boys or whatever it is over family. Then they actually get into defensive mode because, oh, well, family should be, or something like that.
Yeah.
What one common scenario, let's talk about family just for a bit as being the value.
Sure.
One common scenario that I've found, and I'd love your feedback on this, is somebody says, like, next year I'm going to really just focus on my family, and next year I'm really going to just spend time with the kids, and I'm going to do this. But right now I'm just building this business, or right now I'm just, trying to get that next level of my career so that I can produce and do this or that, and I'm spending all the time and energy it's going into this. But next year, does next year actually happen? And what would you say if that was your client as to, help them move forward?
Well, probably the first thing I'd say would be fairly flippant, but I'd say it anyway, because that's the kind of person I am, is like, how do you know you're going to be alive next year? At the end of the day. And I've had that justification from clients many times where they've said that they're working. I had one client who was working 120 hours a week. He was a stockbroker.
Wow.
And even his time with his kid, he'd have his laptop on his lap, doing work while he's playing with his kids, which he's hardly engaged with it. And it's just like, okay, let's move forward 10 years, and you've missed that year. How much would you pay to have it back? How much would you pay to spend that time? Because it doesn't matter how much money you earn, you can never get that time back. Now, personally, I don't have kids, but I know enough people that have, that regretted the time that they spent, and they use the family as almost like a scapegoat. So it's like, well, I'm really doing this because I want to pay for my kids' education, for my kids' college fund. So then I'd say, well, do you think your kids are going to be grateful in 20 years' time that they know their father or mother worked themselves into the ground to pay for their education? Or do you think they'd rather have seen more of you and seen you happier? So there's more than one way to sort of skin that particular cat's gut. And it depends, largely on the client. But it's, you're right, it's something that crops up again and again and again with family.
Oh, it sure does. Sure does. So, just as an audience there, I'm going to speak to the audience for a moment. Does something resonate with you about what Tim has just shared? The insight that he's just shared? Is there something that you can take and just use as a result of what you just learned from Tim? Perhaps there's something in your value system where you think the value of family is high, but your actions aren't in alignment with that. And as Tim mentioned also, you can't take that year back. So just ask yourself those questions. This is a coaching TV show, so coaching, we reflect and we ask questions back. So, but it's a great, powerful question to ask, because I concur with you. Family comes up all the time, and family is one of my core values. But I don't take that flippantly, and I'm conscious with that. I shared that with you too, or a little bit earlier. Maybe the audience can see this too. I come up with a little chart here: leadership, encouragement, financial independence, family, faith, integrity, and wisdom. Those are my core values. And I don't know if you can read that, but when I know what my core values are, I can start to actually use them by using them as filters. And also when I have them up on my wall, when important things come up, or when I get stressed or something like that, or when I have two choices that I think, both could be weighed this way, that way, I find it as a great tool to actually use to move forward. So what value would you say there would be in having people, figuring out what their values are, but also keeping them in front of them so they can use them as a tool?
I think that's a really important point you made, Scott. We can use our own values to motivate ourselves. So supposing you're a writer and you live in New York and you've got very little money, and you wake up and you've got, you know that you've got to put in a 12-hour day or whatever, and you wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning, whatever, and it's freezing cold because you've got no heating, because you've got no money, and you're in bed, which is warm, and you put your hand out and it's cold and you don't want to leave your bed. Who would? What happens then is people focus on what they don't want. I don't want to be cold. I don't want to be uncomfortable, whatever. That's when you bring the values in. But I've got this value of, whatever it is. Maybe it's connection, and their writing allows them to connect to other people. So it's actually focusing on what's going to get you to do it. So values can be incredibly motivating if, this is the important bit, if you can remember to focus on the values rather than the difficulty that we need to push through at a time. And there's always going to be that. It's interesting you got integrity on there, because that's an important value to me. And that's one of the things, I didn't know it at the time, that I was massively out of alignment when I was looking at sales. I always tried to operate with integrity. I always tried to put the customer first. But it's not always easy to do that when you're working for blue chip organisations that are profit driven, and there's product drives coming down to sell a certain product or whatever. Right. And that's what looking back now, why I always felt stressed and uncomfortable, because it wasn't in alignment with my values, and nothing was ever going to make that. Nothing could shoehorn that.
Yeah.
I'll give you a great example. So this is about 3 years ago now. I had a client, really, really clever guy, and he hired me he just was about to go into his second year of law school, but he was an IT expert, and he was so good that he'd gone down to 2.5 days a week doing IT, and he could still afford to upkeep his family and pay for his school to do law school. So this is how good this guy was. But he said, I want to make sure it's the right decision. So we went through a values process. Now, I do something called anti-values as well. Mm-hmm. So somebody may have a value of like integrity, but you may have an anti-value of dishonesty. Okay, well, I wish there was an opposite to integrity, but there isn't. There should be. You should invent it. Okay. So anyway, so I did the core values, and we went through his core values. There was nothing really there. But at the top of his anti-values list was conflict was number 1, and stress was number 2. Now, if you can think of many professions this side of being a combat troop in Afghanistan, where you're going to get more conflict and more stress than the legal profession, mm-hmm. then you're a better person than I, because I couldn't. So I pointed these out. And as a coach, we don't tell our clients what to do. Our job is to remove the layers, let them see stuff and come to their own conclusions. So what do you think? And he looked at, concentrated on the core values. He said, yeah, that shouldn't be a problem. I said, well, what about the anti-values? What about the conflict and the stress? He says, well, I'm sure you can teach some stress management techniques. I said, well, yeah, I can. The best stress management technique is never get stressed in the first place. Yep. You put yourself on a daily basis into a stressful conflict situation. He didn't listen to me. He'd already made his mind up when he hired, that he was going to carry on. It was just, all sorts of cognitive biases that kicked in then. But it's interesting when you look at it like that, and you see, and the times I've said to people, or they've come to the conclusion themselves, they're just in the wrong career. Mm. That's why they feel so bad. It's just their values are never going to align with the business or the industry that they work in.
Awesome.
If peace is your number 1 value, you don't want to go and get a job on the stock exchange for. You know what I mean? It's not going to work. It doesn't matter how hard you try.
Such a good point. So, yeah, I'm going to ask you about that then. So I've often helped people with their passions as a separate tool to figure out what they're passionate about, and then I lead into core values as another tool. And I'm curious to see how this can work, because I agree with you. A lot of people are in the wrong profession, and they're working 80,000 hours within the lifespan, and they're not happy. And the stats are overwhelming as to people that are not happy doing what they do. Sure. And there's intrinsic studies and extrinsic studies where it's shown that more money doesn't necessarily bring more satisfaction within the job force.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So when people identify their values and they actually are clear on them, how can that help them change careers or to start living in their passion so they can also live out of their values?
Okay. Well, the starting point is them understanding if they are out of alignment with value. So if it's an attorney whose number 1 value is peace, his number 1 anti-value is conflict, then getting that understanding that that's not going to work. It doesn't matter how much money you're being paid, and you're absolutely right. Once you get into 6-figure salaries, the correlation between happiness and income just starts to vanish.
Yes.
There's just as many unhappy rich people as there are unhappy poor people, So in terms of, let me go back to another example with a client from a while ago. This guy had been involved in I can't think what you call it in the US, but it's like a initial public offering where his business was floated on the stock exchange, and he was the finance director or finance officer, and he'd gone through this whole public sale of the business, and he wanted to set up a new business, but he didn't know what to do. So we did a value presentation, and I'm not sure how now. This is a while ago. We got onto talking about gardening. And he quite enjoyed gardening, but his drive was to, he was very very philanthropic. So with his employees, before he sold the business, he wanted to make sure that they got good medical coverage, that they were paid well, that they got good working conditions, that they were appreciated, etc., etc. And this all stuff all came out in the values. So we talked about gardening, and I said, well, have you thought of just starting a gardening company? He said, well, at my age, I don't want to be a gardener. I said, well, you don't need to be. You can run a business in alignment with your values. You're going to get just as much satisfaction because you're employing people, you're giving them good conditions, you're meeting this value by exceeding customer expectations, etc. Suddenly, you're in alignment with the values. The nature of the business doesn't really matter then if it's your business. And that's what a lot of people with small businesses forget. You can make... There are some exceptions where they won't overlap, but on the whole, you can make your values, your personal values, the same as your business values.
Yeah.
And then you're in nirvana, really. That may be a bit of a stretch, but you know what I mean. So for me, it's acting with integrity. It's having fun. I like my clients. Got a very British sense of humour. I want them to have fun while they do it. I don't want to worry about it. So it's, but that's within my scope. That's within my remit to do that. The people that don't get that, they won't hire me, and that's fine. I'll find a coach that's more suitable for them.
That's awesome, man. That's so cool. Well, Tim, it's just been a privilege and an honor to have you on the show. And also, I just know as an audience member that you got something incredibly valuable out of this conversation. And I hope now you've actually got it locked in for yourself that it's important for you to figure out what your core values are. And Tim and I probably would share the same thing. It doesn't matter how you figure out what your values are. If you go with my source or Tim's source, figure out what it is. Figure out how you find your values. Because after that, there's so many techniques and things that you can use with your values. And how would you love to live in your sweet spot and live with passion? So if you want to find Tim, I encourage you to go to adaringadventure.com and feel free to actually find him out in Facebook land at facebook.com/adaringadventure, and you'll be able to connect with him there. And also he has a book, Getting in Alignment with Your Core Values as well. So Tim, it's just been a privilege just to have you on here, and yeah, it's just awesome talking with somebody who shares my same importance on and helping people figure out what their values are, and this is awesome.
Likewise, I've got to say likewise, because it's not very often I do speak with coaches that have got the same sort of outlook on it, and it always pumps me to find those other people out there doing the same kind of work. So good for you, man, and I appreciate being on. Thank you.
Oh, thanks a lot, man. So yeah, we'll be in touch, buddy. And feel free to continue watching if you have the live stream out there. We're going to talk a little bit about family in a different arena when you get to meet Bill when he's actually on here. And I'm going to surprise him with a neat little video clip as well. So, all right, buddy. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Take care.
Take care.
Thanks, Scott.
Bye.
Bye.
I am now privileged to interview and introduce to you Bill Nixon. Now, Bill, you work for the University of Saskatchewan. You do documentaries and videos and stuff. And I just knew when we were going to air this episode that you would be somebody that I wanted to have on here because you have a great sense of values. We've talked about values, and it's also something that that you are doing some extraordinary things with what's important to you. So tell us a little bit about what you do doing with your documentaries and stuff like that.
Well, the documentaries actually are very, very, very varied. Put it that way. We basically work with the university to try and enhance the educational experience that the students have. So even though I'm doing documentaries, so to speak, I do a lot of promotional video, a lot of educational video, besides the documentary stuff. As funding has kind of gone down at the universities, they're not funded quite as well as they used to be. We're moving further more into promotional videos and those kinds of things. The big, long documentaries that we used to do 5 or 6 years ago aren't quite coming around that much anymore.
Yeah.
And so, you know, and also we're finding that the YouTube generation, if it's longer than 5 minutes, and they've lost contact with you.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
we're taking what probably would have been 20-minute videos, 22-minute videos 5 or 6 years ago, and we're taking all that content and we're squashing it into 5 minutes or less now.
Yeah. Oh,
So,
wow. There we are. Eh?
Yeah, and so
It's like
it's a challenging.
cramming it in.
It's challenging, but it also makes you so that you take only the important parts, and you only feature the important parts,
Right.
and there's no fluff.
Yes.
Yeah. So so it's changing. I mean, that's the way you know, industries develop, and
Yep.
you have to move forward with the industries, and so that's what we've been trying to do here.
Excellent. Very cool. Very cool. So I'm interested in your feedback. You were here in the studio
Yes.
with us. Some of the things that you may have heard from the beginning of a talk, first of all, with
Yeah.
why people don't figure out what their values are, what they are, and some of those things.
And that's true. I mean, you asked me to come on, and you know, I've dealt with values before. I've thought, you know, put some time and effort into it. But if you haven't been thinking about your values for some time, I mean, life carries on, and the thought of values and those kinds of things kind of fall off to the side.
Right.
And so when you asked me to come on here, I had to rethink, you know, where do my values actually sit? And what do I think about?
Sure.
You know, am I following my values? I think I am.
Yeah.
You know, I feel very confident that that the values that I've developed through my lifetime are still the values that I live by.
Right. Yeah.
And so, but I think it's a really good exercise, an exercise that you forced me to do.
Excellent.
But
Excellent.
I think it's a very good exercise to reassociate yourself
Yeah, sure.
with your values,
Yeah.
so that you know, as you look forward, those are the things that are going to pull you forward.
Yes.
And so I had to go through that exercise again, just to ensure to convince myself that I was still going in the right directions.
That's awesome. That's
So-
awesome. That's well. What can I say? I'm a coach. I put people on the spot,
You
so
did.
that's just part of. That's just part of it, man.
Yes, but I think it was a good exercise.
Yeah.
I really think it was. Yeah.
Awesome.
And some of
Right.
the things that you were talking about in the prior segment, our values are things that came up obviously with me. So, you know, one of the things that he talked about was freedom. I would put that as a kind of a major heading. I would say,
Yep.
you know, there's so many things that are involved in freedom, but it was one of those things that came up with me for me.
Yeah.
Because independence, those kinds of things, which I put under freedom, are big values for me. The separation for me kind of work and play is
Right.
important.
Right.
You know, even though money or finances would come up as a possible value, the only reason I work is so that I can do the things that I want to do, so that I can get the
Yes.
finances that I want to have, so that I can do it. I'm lucky enough that my work falls in with a lot of my values, so it's not a traumatic thing for me to go back to work and
Yeah.
work with people who, you know, are people who have a lot of integrity, people
Sure.
who have a lot of respect, people who are trying to do things for other people.
Yes.
That's not a major job for me, but I mean, I still separate my work from my play, so
Yeah.
to speak. So, it's just a means for me to do the other things that I want to do.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I find that that's an important thing to do because for me, when I am not at work, I am not a person who is on the, on my computer checking my emails,
Right.
looking at my schedule to make sure that I have things. When I'm not at work, I'm not at work.
Yeah.
If there's an emergency and somebody phones me, I go back, I do my job, I make sure that things are looked after. But when I'm not at work, I am not at work. What it does is it takes your stress levels down so that you are enjoying where you are at the moment.
Yes.
And I think that's, for me, that's very important.
That's very important.
Yeah.
Enjoying where you're at in the moment.
Yeah.
It would be called The Way, and it stars Martin Sheen and Emilio Estevez. And as part of the movie, they actually travel the Camino de Santiago.
Yes.
It's 800 kilometers along the coast of Spain.
Spain, northern coast of Spain.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. So first of all, tell me a little bit about the movie, how it moved you.
Just happened to catch this movie. I started watching it, and it's an adventure that really kind of inspired me. The people that were in the movie, and I think it happens probably to a lot of the pilgrims who are part of that, along the way they found values.
Yeah.
They found their own values.
Yes.
And, what they ended up with is not what they started with.
Mm.
And I think, that kind of talks to you about life.
Yeah.
What you start with may not be what you end up with. And
Yes.
hopefully you grow. And that's what you saw these people doing. They were growing as they were moving along through this journey.
Yeah.
And that is not a small journey.
No.
You have to overcome a lot of things. It's 800 kilometers. You're going to be walking anywhere between 27 to 30 kilometers per day.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a small feat.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you put yourself in those kinds of situations, I think you find yourself reconnecting with all your values.
Yeah.
And this is something that I will be doing.
Mm-hmm.
I have it in my plans. I'm hoping next fall. So it's a matter of getting the proper time and stuff. But I've done these things before. So I've done things. I've climbed Mount Kilimanjaro.
That's awesome.
We spent some time, planning this out. But it was a plan that we had,
Mm-hmm.
and so we just did it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you have to do in life. You have to look at where you want to go, what you want to do, and you just have to go out and do those things. I've also kayaked down the Yukon River, 900 kilometers down the Yukon River from Lake Bennett right to Dawson City.
Awesome.
Out in the wilderness, you are out there on your own. You're by yourself. It takes you 16 days to do this, and I think if you want to reconnect with yourself or with your partner,
Wow.
you can do that.
Wow.
So
amazing, eh?
and I think that's part of your life as you go along.
Mm-hmm.
It's having those goals, and it doesn't have to be travel. It doesn't have to be climbing a mountain. It can be education. I wasn't a scholar when I was in high school, but I knew that education was important to me. It was always important to my family.
Yep.
It was important to me, and even though I had some good jobs, I wanted to have some education.
Yeah.
And but I was scared of doing it
Right.
because I was not a scholar.
Mm.
I made it through my grade 12, but just barely, I just kind of carried through there. But I went back to university, and I didn't just get my Bachelor of Education.
Right.
I went back again. I had a mentor who convinced me to go back and get my master's degree.
Yeah.
And so, I'm not a scholar, but I have a master's degree in education.
You do. Yeah.
And it's because I convinced myself that I could do it.
Yeah.
I told myself that I could do it, and I did do it. And when it was all said and done, when it was all over, it wasn't that hard.
Yeah. I just think that
So-
that's such an incredible story that you share about how people can identify what their values are when they're out in nature and when they're doing things like this walk. And I
Yes.
could share, like, even for myself, there's an opportunity that I had just to take off for 3 days and just by myself, I went to the Hanging Hearts Lake up
Right.
in
In
northern
there,
Saskatchewan. And I took 3 days by myself, and how you actually reconnect with yourself and with God
Certainly.
and your spirit and all of these things is so incredible, and you really have to like yourself in those moments,
Yes.
especially when you're getting away from these things.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm
You
not-
don't have all those.
I work in media day in and day out, and I am probably as far removed from media as I can be because, quite frankly, I have a cell phone. I hardly ever carry it. I do use my computer when I go home, but when I'm on a trip someplace or something,
Yep.
it doesn't go along with me.
Yeah.
I don't, that kind of thing isn't what I'm looking for. I'm looking to
Yeah.
remove myself from those electronics, from those areas, and I'm looking to really experience life
Yeah. Yeah.
and experience the people that I meet. If you're if you're hooked to your electronics, meeting somebody isn't quite as easy because you're glued to this thing.
Sure.
If you're not glued to it, you're looking around. I've met just some fantastic people in my travels.
Yeah.
And these people, every person that you meet leaves something behind.
Oh, yes.
All of them do. And
So true.
and it builds you as a person, as you go through life, because you're meeting these people, you're taking something from them, hopefully giving something to them.
Yeah.
Right? But you're taking something from them that's going to make your life change. It's going to make it hopefully better, and usually it does. And you can, even if these people are maybe a little bit ill-spirited, you still take something away from them.
Yeah.
Because maybe what you don't want to be, or
Right.
maybe you should be treating people a little bit different, or that kind of thing. So maybe you see something in yourself through that person.
Yeah.
So to me, it's so important to just continue on and to try and get yourself out into the world, meet different ethnical groups,
Yes.
and to different people, because they all have so much to offer.
Yeah, and I'm going to just reframe that back to you because that was such a great point. What are you doing to get out there and get in touch with nature, and how are you getting away from this, and from your computers and all the things that we're plugged into? There's a big trend right now where some people are really just saying, are you plugged in or are you not? And sometimes we just need to get out of the plug-in, and we need to get away from that and then get into that place where we can just connect with ourselves again. And let's talk a little bit about family as well, and how family dynamics can come into just core values. And family dynamics can come into just living with values as well. So tell me a little bit about how the value of family just comes and goes, and how you can reconnect with the value of family.
Well, I think if you asked anybody about core values, first thing, my family is, and I would once again put family as a big heading and with a whole whack of core values underneath it.
Yeah.
Because if you have integrity, honesty, that kind of thing going on in your core values,
Yeah.
it's going to reflect on family, no matter what. And so if you didn't even put family down as a core value, it would be.
Yeah.
Because if you have children, have a spouse, anything that is part of your core values is going to reflect back to the other person or to the other people that you're associated with. So as far as family goes, you could associate that with friends, you could associate it with colleagues, you could associate, because really when you get down to the bottom of it, these are all your family.
Yeah.
So because each and every one of those people have some kind of value that they're passing on to you, and you have
Right.
values that you're passing on to them.
Right.
And for some reason, in many cases, it just seems to me that the people that you end up associating with, or you end up hanging out with, all seem to have the same kinds of values.
That's true.
You know, maybe their children mean a lot to them. Maybe, you know, maybe they have a passion for a particular thing, and you find out that, yeah, you have those passions too, those
It's
same
true.
ideas, and somehow you're magically drawn together.
It's true.
I've been in many situations where I've been somewhere by myself,
Mm-hmm.
thinking to myself, you know, I'm just gonna sit back and, you know, just let the world go by, and just allow whatever is going to happen.
Yeah.
And you know, sure enough, somebody or a group of people or whatever come along. You start up a conversation, and all of a sudden, you're part of that group,
Mm-hmm.
and you're moving on with those people.
Yeah.
And it's happened to me a lot.
Yeah.
And it's funny because those people, if I was walking down the street, I might not even associate with them.
Yeah.
But they've come up to you, and for some reason, you have drawn those people to you.
Yeah.
And you find out that your values are very similar, and the things that you want to do and like to do are very similar, and you move on from there, and they become your friends for lifetime friends.
That's right.
And it's quite interesting. I just find that fascinating, how
Mhm.
that can happen.
Yeah. Definitely.
So, yeah.
Well, just behind you, I just threw up a photo, and this is what's on the background screen.
Mhm.
And, you know, that's my little 1-year-old.
Yeah.
And what I think is cool is that he just loves his value of his family and of his
Yes.
dad. So as a little 1-year-old, he's forming values as well.
Absolutely.
And he's got his value. Like he comes up and he just like walks up to you. And in this case, he just walked up to me and just gave me a kiss. And
Yeah.
and now I'm his dad.
Hmm.
Like he loves me, and that's what's important. And you know, before I do this episode, because they were upstairs, they were like, "Oh, where's my dad? He's going away. Why is he going away? Why
Mhm.
wouldn't he want to spend time with me?"
Right.
And value of family is already established as a little 1-year-old,
Yeah.
and it's incredible how we actually float away. So as we've noticed, the value of family we brought up many times in this
Oh, yes.
episode because it's so important. And it's such an intrinsic part of who we are and what matters the most to us. So there's a few questions that I want to ask you as we wrap up this episode. And first of all is, what matters the most to you? And I'm going to pause there. And I don't want you to ask that question rhetorically. I want you to actually ask yourself that and then think deeper. Like, what is it that matters the most to you? Second question is, why aren't you figuring out what matters the most to you? Because likely you don't have a top list of 5 to 7 core values that matter the most to you, like I was identifying over here when I was talking with Tim. And then why isn't it that you actually aren't doing it? But moreover, when you actually find out what your core values are, do you think that you would find benefit in that? Do you think that your life would be better? So there's a lot of things that are holding people back, Bill, from figuring out what their core values are. And we touched on some of those things. So I hope that you as an audience take this information, take this knowledge, and you take in what Bill and what Tim have shared and what I have shared about core values, and you get deeper into knowledge of what core values are, knowledge of what matters the most to you, so that you don't have to live in the doubt and the shame and not know what values are. Sign up if you want to the newsletter that I can send you, and I'll give you an update when that core value game is ready to go, and you can figure it out just by playing the game. It's free, it's an adventure, and you'll be able to figure that out. That's just one tool. Find a coach also that you can trust, that can lead you down the right path to figure out what your core values are as well. It's hard to figure some of these things out by yourself, wouldn't you agree?
Yes. Yeah.
And as you're weeding through life, and as you're sorting things out, you want to get the results that you need. And then the last thing, some of the things that Bill and I talked about, is where are you going to get away from this? To get away from the plug-in. To get away so you can actually find yourself again, to find out what your values are. Or as Bill mentioned in the movie The Way, how the pilgrims discovered who they were, discovered what their values were along the journey. Because I promise you that when you're on a journey, when you're going somewhere, when you're outside of your regular routine, that there's an incredible abundance that comes from that, because you are figuring out what matters the most to you. And as you live out of what matters the most to you, you have passion. I can guarantee you, when I'm living out of my leadership quality, that's actually right now I'm leading a coaching TV show. When I look at encouragement for myself, I'm an encouraging person. If I'm not encouraging people, then I'm at a lack. And I hope that you find that this is an encouragement for you, because I'm producing this video or this TV show for you, because I want it to be an encouragement for you. And I'm trying to pick guests that I think will also be encouragements for you. Financial independence is something that's important to me. And as I go down the list, I can identify for myself what I'm passionate about and how I can live and live alive. And I want you to find that same knowledge out. So thank you so much for watching our episode today. We air every Wednesday until December 19th. We'll take a little bit of break during the Christmas break. Next episode is going to be how to create an abundance mindset. And that's an incredible topic. We have some special guests that day. One is unannounced at the moment, and we'll let you know very shortly who that is. And we also have Carol Harrison to share a story about creating abundance as well. Don't miss that episode. I'll also share the 5 keys to creating an abundance mindset, and you won't want to miss that. So until we chat again, live with passion and have abundance in life.